Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our pre-submission community meeting for the Wheaton Gateway project. And this is a specific meeting for our preliminary plan of subdivision and site plan submissions. My name is Goya Roberts. I'm the development manager with Passionate and Sustainable Ventures, otherwise known as PSV, and I'll be your presenter for the evening. A brief agenda just to orient you on what we're going to talk about this evening. We're going to start with introductions while I introduce you to the four entities that comprise the Wheaton Gateway partnership. And from there, we'll talk about the broader team who is assisting us with navigating the park and planning entitlement process and helping us bring this project through design and hopefully ultimately through construction. Then we'll talk a bit about a project overview and talk about the goals of the project as well. And what that entails would be just orienting those who may not be familiar with this project as to the site and where the project is going to be located. We'll talk a bit more about project goals, a little bit about our development approach and what underlying principles guide us as we navigate this development process. We'll talk about our project objectives as well as the county objectives and how those sort of interrelate with each other. Next, we'll talk briefly about our current status, and that would be a little bit of a history talking about how we came to this point from when we started the process of this development and talk through the timeline and take a look forward as to where we're heading with our next milestones. Then we'll talk briefly a little bit more about our approved sketch plan, which is our most recent park and planning milestone that the project has achieved. And then we'll look to the future and talk about what we're going to plan to submit over the next few weeks for our site and subdivision plan submission. Then we'll open it to the audience at home as well as those here joining us tonight for questions and answers and see if we can answer everything that you may have on your mind. There are four entities that make up the Wheaton Gateway Partnership. First being the Duffy companies, our company, Passionate and Sustainable Ventures, otherwise known as PSV. Here we have our principal, Shane Poland, as well as my fellow development manager, Will Combs, joining us this evening, as well as Wilco and the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County. Just a little bit more about each of the entities that make up the partnership. The Duffy Companies is a third-generation family business. They are a developer, a contractor, and an owner, and they primarily focus on commercial and multifamily properties. They're a long-term holder, and they focus on quality and durability in their developments with a high focus on sustainability. PSV, Passionate and Sustainable Ventures, we're a boutique development firm specializing in primarily sustainable buildings. And we take a science-based approach to design and development of these buildings. And you'll learn a little bit more about what that science-based approach means in a few slides. We're also long-term focused, and we have an expertise in curating the appropriate team that's well-suited to help us achieve our unique project goals. Next, we have Wilco, which is a locally owned company. They've been around since roughly the 1960s. They're also a partner on this project, and their unique skill is that they're adept at identifying overlooked opportunities in the local market. They themselves are developers, they're owners, investors, and they manage commercial real estate properties, and they have a deep understanding of the Washington metropolitan area. And here we have Bob Mazuka, who is the representative that's working with the development team. Next, we have the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County, otherwise known as HOC. They're a quasi-government agency, governmental agency that is mission-focused. And that mission is to provide affordable housing and support services that enhance the lives of low to moderate income families and individuals in Montgomery County. They themselves are a developer, owner, and a manager of commercial real estate properties, primarily focusing on multifamily and affordable housing. They too are long-term holders, and they focus on quality and durability as well. And at the top row, we have the executive leadership team of HOC, Chelsea Andrews, Kayreen Brown, and Zach Marks, respectively, and our direct cohorts that are working on the project with us, Dejana Donahue and Alex Lorenz. So as I talk through the introductions of various entities that make up the Wheaton Gateway project, you've probably heard me repeating certain words. There's a lot of commonalities that you'll find between these partners, right? They're all developers. They're owners, they have a long-term focus, or they're focused on quality and durability, right? And we think that these are the commonalities that brought them together to form an entity which was designed to develop the Wheaton Gateway project. I mentioned also that we'll be talking about our broader team. As you can see, there's a lot of logos, there's a lot of partners here that are involved in making a project like this come to fruition. We have everything from architects to interior designers, lighting designers, various engineers, civil, geotechnical, structural. Point being is it takes a team to bring a project such as this to fruition. And we think that we've done a really good job in identifying the partners that are best suited to help us achieve these goals. And we'll talk a bit more about what those particular goals are. To orient everyone just briefly, onto where our project is located. The image on the left is a broader aerial image of the Wheaton CBD, Central Business District. And just in the outline as red is the location of our site. So as you can see, we're just on the border of Veirs Road and University Boulevard. And if you look on the right image, slightly more zoomed in, you get a better understanding of the assemblage, meaning the different parcels that make up the property of the Wheaton Gateway project. First, you'll see the mattress firm, which was located directly on the corner of University Boulevard and Veirs Mill Road, which is owned outright by Wilco. To the back of that, there was the Ambassador Hotel, which was owned by HOC and in part by Wilco as well. And lastly, the Lindsay Ford dealership, which I think most of you are familiar with, was the last piece that rounded out the assemblage that will make up this Wheaton Gateway development that we're talking about today. Now to talk a little bit about the goals for the project. So we want to provide a synergistic mix of uses, right? We want to create a vibrant, healthy community. And we want to make sure that we're tackling a range of incomes, different income levels that we want to target for diversity and affordability. We also want to make sure that we're designing this project at highest levels of sustainability and resilience. And you'll see that echoed as we talk more about our sustainability goals. And we want to make sure that we're designing places and spaces that benefit the broader community. In addition to that, we're focusing on a range of transportation options. So we're about a 2 to 5 minute walk from the Wheaton Glenmont Metro Station. And as well as we're located right next to an upcoming bus rapid transit line, which is planned for right outside of our front door at our property. We want to make sure that we're creating a visually appealing gateway to the Wheaton Central Business District. So for those of you who understand where our project is located, if you're coming from the north heading south on Veirs Mill Road, our property is going to be one of the first things you see before you hit the downtown Wheaton area, right? We want to make sure we can design buildings that give a presence or give an entrance into the Wheaton area, and that's going to be one of our focuses. Similarly, we want to make sure we're focusing on accessibility design as well as inclusive design, right? We want to make sure that we're designing to universal standards, typical ADA standards, to make sure that our project is inclusive for people of all abilities. And we also want to make sure we're striving for best value in achieving our goals. We'll talk about various sustainability standards that we're trying to achieve. And they also often have a connotation of being more expensive when we don't think that that is actually the case. We think that we can build these high-performing buildings for cost parity or roughly the same cost that we're building the traditional building that you would see erected in any neighborhood. So that is one of our focal points. Again, we want to design with the project with the focus of human health and wellness in mind. And then we also want to make sure that we're incorporating a variety of amenities that are appropriate for residents of all ages. We plan to have a market rate building that will encompass all ages, as well as a senior building as well. And we want to make sure that our amenities speak specifically to those demographics that we plan to occupy our buildings. Now, I talked a little bit about our development approach, and the image that you're seeing on the screen here again is something called the triple bottom line. If you do any Googling, you'll see it anywhere. And it's not something that PSV themselves have developed, but I think it underpins our focal point and the way we choose to look at our developments and approach our developments. Essentially, what it really means is we want to build a better building, a building that is better than code minimum. And what that means is we're building a better building for the people, meaning the occupants of the building and the surrounding community. We want to build a better building for the planet, and that means a better building that is better for the environment. And ultimately, we want to make sure we build a building that is profitable. We're building a mixed income building, so it's going to have a range of incomes, and we believe that by taking this approach, we can use some of the market rate components of the building that could help support the affordable building and make sure that the building is still ultimately profitable in a level that most traditional developments may not be able to afford or be able to see. So again, you hear me talking about better than code minimum, build better buildings over and over again. So what does that exactly mean? Starting to the left of the gray line, you'll see that a code minimum building is the basic minimum legal requirement you need to be able to occupy a building. That means it needs to meet the International Building Code standards, the International Energy Conservation Code standard. Those are just the baseline to get any building sort of permitted and occupied. When you start moving towards the right of that gray line, you start to get to the above code minimum, better building standards, right? These are third-party verified sustainable standards that we are trying to achieve that we think just take our building to the next level. They include things such as Energy Star, which I'm sure many of you have seen on various appliances throughout your home. LEED is a common one that I'm sure you've heard on many times over and over again. You heard me mention health for the buildings and make sure we're targeting indoor air plus, which means better indoor air quality for our buildings. So these are some of the different sustainability metrics that we are targeting as a scope for our building and trying to achieve. I think the crown jewel of what we're trying to target here is Passive House, which is probably the world's most rigorous energy standard for a building. And that basically means that Passive House focuses on quality, health, as well as building energy in terms of putting forward science-based approaches to designing and developing buildings. And we think that if we hit these standards, this will just be well beyond some of the traditional non-code code minimum buildings that are out there. Again, we're talking about here in this slide a little bit about the county objectives. You're seeing a number of things here. You're seeing the Wheaton CBD vicinity sector plan, the bicycle master plan. You're seeing Thrive Montgomery, the Montgomery County Climate Action Plan. All of these are the myriad of different plans and guidelines that we have to adhere to as we're navigating the entitlement process. And I bring this up to say that in addition to our sustainability goals, as well as these goals, there's quite a bit for our team to balance, right? It's trying to find an equilibrium as we bring these projects through the entitlement and park and planning process, trying to find an equilibrium between all of these different objectives to make sure that we can achieve our goals as well as the goals that the county desires. All right, I just want to talk briefly about our timeline and mostly speaking about where we started and how we got up until this point, and then we'll turn and look forward. So we started this process. This isn't our first time coming out and meeting the community. We started this process in 2019 where we had a visioning kickoff session where we started to talk to the community generally about what our intent was and started to go to the various community groups and understanding what they thought they wanted to see in this community and what we thought was appropriate. We had a visioning session in 2019. Shortly after that, we had the demolition of the Ambassador Hotel. We were finally able to take down that hotel and sort of lay the groundwork for us to be able to start to plan and move forward. And that happened in 2020. Then is when we started the entitlement process where we first embarked on our concept plan. Again, concept plan is one of the stages that is involved in Montgomery County planning process, but it's a voluntary process, right? It's not necessarily something that is required, but it's something that our team elected to do just to obviously get more feedback and engagement with park and planning and various members of the community. That was completed in the second quarter of 2020. Since then, since the concept plan, we continue to work vigorously on the project to navigate towards our sketch plan approval, which was completed in the second quarter of 2022. And again, that's the most recent milestone, and we'll talk about what that sketch plan looked like in a few slides. Now, since then, you probably noticed there's a bit of a gap since 2022 and where we are here today. And just to give a bit of context as to why that time elapsed, is that obviously we're working with HOC, which is a quasi-governmental entity, and they have certain requirements that they need to put in place when we're going through a procurement process. At this time, we were looking to procure our architectural, our engineering team, and make sure that we can get them on board for the next phase, which is the site plan and obviously building permits and designing that into the future. So that process took a little while to make sure that we were meeting the requirements and the standards needed to make sure we were having a compliant procurement process. And that brought us to today. One thing that we're happy to say is that the team that helped us navigate concept plan and sketch plan is the very same team that is joining us for the preliminary plan of subdivision and site plan. So we're able to retain that knowledge and all of that understanding from the team and continue to move forward. So our anticipated roughly around the third or fourth quarter of last year, we picked up on the process of our site plan development, and we're targeting to have that done within this quarter. We're probably in the next few weeks or so, we're targeting to have that submitted. From there, we anticipate the site plan process as we go through entitlement. It's going to be a bit of a lengthy process, a little bit of a dance between us and the park and planning department. And that's going to go on through probably around the fourth quarter of 2025. And during that time, we'll be starting to tee up the rest of our team in terms of design and understanding the permitting process and the general contractor procurement process as well. We anticipate that roughly around the first quarter of 2026, we would have completed the permitting process with the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services, and we would have our GC on board. And shortly thereafter, we will be looking to commence construction in 2026. Now, for the first phase, and I know this is the first time you're hearing about phases, I'll talk about how those phases are broken down shortly. We anticipate that first phase will probably take about 36 months to complete. Now, the approved sketch plan. Again, here we just have a sample of our approved sketch plan, and the table you're seeing here is just a glimpse of the sort of things that we discussed at the sketch plan stage. We're talking about the maximum amount of square footage that we're allowed to build. We're talking about the maximum amount of retail and residential square footage, the max building heights, how many stories. These are the things that are discussed at the sketch plan phase, and this is our most recent milestone. So just to give you a flavor of what we did at the sketch plan phase, before that, we'll talk briefly about the phasing. So our site is broken down into 2 phases and 3 sections. The first phase consists of sections 1 and 2, and you can think of those closely related to the various buildings that are on the site. So those 2 sections will be completed in our first phase. And then secondly, we'll complete the second phase, which consists of our 3rd section or 3rd building, and that's when we'll bring that into fruition. So it's 2 phases and 3 buildings, just for context. Here's just an image, a sketch plan approved image of our interim condition. And this is showing those first 2 phase buildings, our section 1 building in the forefront here. And in the back, you see the smaller section 2 building. Again, we call this our interim phase because notice our section 3 building is not in place here. So we anticipate that this will be in place for some time before we actually continue to do the construction. Again, it's going to be a temporary measure. But again, the team felt it was important to be able to open up that space to the general community for its use until such time that we bring forward the 3rd building. Again, that building is eminent, but again, we thought that in the interim, it would be a good use of the space. Now you're seeing some buildings here shown in that interim phase. We're currently workshopping that. That probably won't be involved in our current site plan, and we can give you a bit more context to that during the Q&A. Again, just another view. This is showing the full final build-out condition of the phase 2, which would include the section 3 building. And this is just on the corner of Veirs and University. Rotating around slightly, taking another view from Eastern University. We're starting to get a better view of the section 2 building, as well as the section 1 and 3 buildings in the background. And another view here, just the corner of Kensington and East, right, with a much closer view of the section 2 building. The final image here is down at street level, just to give you some context of what that East Avenue building would look like. As most of you would know, if you've been on East Avenue, there's a residential neighborhood on the right. And then you'll start to see our section 2 building and then our section 1 building in the background again. So there's a transition there, right? We're making sure that we're stepping up from the residential houses and we're not going to 11 stories immediately. We're just progressing our way up. And that's guided by the zoning code as well. Okay, so just to recap, before I transition away from that side, just to recap again, we've heard comments in the past that, oh, these buildings are blue and they have no windows and no balconies, and I don't understand what I'm looking at. Again, that is just the sketch plan approval phase. This is just about how tall these buildings are going to be, how much square footage is going to be in that building. These are the things that are being discussed at that phase of approval. But as we transition towards the site and subdivision plan approval, that's when it starts to get a little bit more defined and the buildings get a bit more character. So again, just to give some more context, at this phase, this is where we're starting to talk about things like materiality. How are these buildings going to look? What are the colors of these buildings? What are the materials that we're intending to use on these buildings? What's the fenestration? What's where the windows and where the doors going to be on this building? These are the things that are getting defined in this phase. Again, so this is that view from the corner of University and Veirs. Again, rotating around, giving you similar views so you can appreciate the transition of the progression of the drawings. Again, this is from University and Eastern Avenue. And notice that we're starting to add more colors and we're starting to try and play with the idea of using these colors to define the different buildings. For example, if you were coming up, hey, I'm at the Wheaton Gateway project and I'm in the building with the red columns, the red banister, you start to get a visual identity of what these buildings are telling people and how they can identify themselves in the neighborhood and the community. Again, similar view from Kensington and East. And this is just an aerial view from across the street, across Ferris Mill Road, just giving a little bit more context. and another view from the corner of University and Veirs. Again, what you'll notice here is that the balconies sort of look a little bit squished down, a little bit of a Juliet balcony. Again, this is the site plan process. This is going to be iterative over the next few months in refining this. We're probably going to update these to full depth balconies. And you're going to start to see some of that transition as you start to navigate this process. Again, this is just a glimpse ideas that we're throwing out. This is between our section 1 and sections 2 building. This is an amenity space that we're toying with. It's a little bit of a Zen garden that we're toying with the idea of doing this. The structure that you see that sort of resembles an older Japanese building sort of shields our parking garage and creates a quiet space in between these two buildings. And in the forefront, you're starting to see a little bit of an outdoor amenity where we have grill areas, seating spaces for our occupants of the building and so on. So again, these are the things that we are starting to think about more in depth and starting to define what's going on in some cases outside the building and in some cases inside the building as well. Again, this is that final view from Eastern Avenue. I think you can get much better context. Again, we're using that color to define the building. You're starting to see materiality in terms of the brick looking finish that's on the front of this building. We're starting to use windows to bring more light into the stairwells and create more open spaces. Again, this is the progression that we're going through as we've moved from our sketch plan approval and started to head into the site and subdivision plan. And just one final view on Eastern Avenue as well. Again, I know we talked about sort of community spaces. This is just an overall colored aerial site plan of the overall site. Just to give you an idea of some of the green spaces that we're planning, there's a small area on the corner of Upton and Eastern Avenue that we're planning a small pocket park for. That'll be open to the community as well. And just the interior of the phase 2 building, there's also a little small urban park that we're currently iterating on designs for. So this should just give you some context as to where the green spaces on the overall site plan to fall ultimately. So the tables that I mentioned in sketch plan before, they are back again also in the site and subdivision plan. And I want you to focus on the bottom right corner. That table is the same maximum areas that we discussed at the sketch plan level. Now, those numbers have not changed. We're still targeting the same amount of residential, retail square footage, same building heights, the same number of stories. But the level of granularity that we're getting to at this phase is the table on top, which starts to talk about our unit counts and the mix of units, right? So we're starting to get into understanding that section 1 will roughly have around 320 plus or minus units, 100 units for the 6-story section 2 building, and 360 unit building for the section 3 building ultimately. Again, phase 2, section 3 will come at a later date. We're obviously going to build the first 2 buildings. We're going to try and get those brought up and occupied. And as they're more successful, then we'll begin to start to discuss the timeline and potential for that section 3 building construction. And just briefly, I'm just going to clip through a few of these floor plans, not in any great detail, just as a key. The orange areas represent commercial spaces. The dark blue areas represent community and common space areas. And the lighter blue represents residential areas where there would be units ultimately. That yellow area that's currently shown is actually being worked and will probably turn to orange over the next few iterations of this plan. But again, this level of detail isn't required at this submission point, but what we do is we're just showing this to demonstrate the level of thinking that is involved in these site plans that help instruct what happens on the outside of the building. Where we put certain spaces on the inside tells us where windows are going to go, how the building will be shaped ultimately. And we're just giving you a little bit of a glimpse as to what the team is actively working on and the steps that we're going through to make sure we can bring these projects to fruition. This is the second floor. You're starting to see more residential units start to creep in on the section 2 building. And here's a typical floor, which is largely residential. And on the section 1 building to the bottom, that's rooftop amenity for that building. And then here we have rooftop amenity for the 2 taller buildings, which is community areas, fitness rooms, party rooms, things of that nature. And here's a little bit of discussion about the parking garage below. One thing to note is that we have a significant amount of grade between the University Boulevard corner and Kensington Boulevard. So we're able to put a lot of subgrade parking, and that's our target. We know that the Wheaton district is challenged as it pertains to parking. So with these many units coming online, we are trying to make sure we can facilitate that parking on site and allow our residents an opportunity to reorient themselves in the direction that they want to go by navigating internally. And this also speaks to our delivery processes, right? We're planning to have delivery trucks come in, be able to deliver on the ground within our site, navigate themselves out and turn themselves around with minimal distraction to the surrounding neighborhoods. All right. And so just to briefly recap, the next phase of our submission would be our preliminary plan of subdivision as well as our site plan submission. And we're targeting anywhere from about 3 to 4 weeks before that submission is ready to go in for the first part for Park and Planning's review. As always, we welcome and invite everybody to join us on our Wheaton Gateway website, where we are constantly sharing this information, and this presentation will be available for you. You can go back and look at the history on how we've engaged the community and how we've brought things forward up until this point, and we'll continue to keep that site updated as we continue through the whole process. With that, I'd like to thank you guys for joining us this evening, and for those of you at home, and I'd like to open it up to those at home and those on the floor for any questions that they may have.
Please feel free to come up to the microphone.
Don?
Do I have a big voice? Yeah, okay. So it's our understanding, compared with the first presentation of 2019, that phases 1 and 2 have been reversed, right?
That is correct.
That's correct, okay. So in the timeline that you showed, where is the demolition of the 4 dealerships?
That hasn't been 100% clearly outlined. We anticipate before the 2026 period, as we get closer to the permitting timeline, we'll probably break that out into a separate demo permit. And we'll probably try to undertake that just prior to when we would commence construction. So my guess is probably in the latter part of 2025, when we know the permit is imminent and we have our general contractor on board, we'll start to take the efforts towards taking those buildings.
Okay, and one last question. I'm very concerned about left turns out of East Avenue. It's not always easy right now to turn left. The majority of the traffic turns left out of East Avenue, coming from the McDonald's and from Upton Drive, and then turns further left on Veirs Mill. And many times when we exit, the left turn lane on Veirs Mill is already packed. There is no room. So I'm just trying to picture this with hundreds of cars trying to do the same thing. Families in this area have multiple cars. I don't know the apartment dwellers, how it works. I don't have any experience, but from what we can see in Montgomery County in this area, families have many cars. And so I hope that there's some kind of traffic study or something that's going to come along with this project, because it's very, very concerning. This could turn into a death trap if there are hundreds of cars stuck down Upton Drive.
Completely understood. I mean, and the point well taken. We are going to be undergoing traffic studies to understand how best within our control we can mitigate any of those issues. I know, at least as it relates to the residents in our property, we're trying to give them different ways to navigate so they don't bottleneck some of those areas that you expressed as a concern. Again, we realize that this intersection is challenged, but we are doing our best, and we'll continue to study the area to see how best we can calm any of those concerns.
Are you working with the county, whatever agency is in charge of traffic management? Or?
Yes, actually, we just spoke to them recently, and they've given us some guidelines on some recent studies we need to do, and that's actually on the way at the moment.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi. I'm here on behalf of my mother. She's at home right now, but I had a question for you. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Eleanor. I grew up on Midvale Road, so it's adjacent to this property that we're talking about. Hi, Howard, and hello. So I know this neighborhood pretty well. Little concerned about the parking situation. You went pretty quick through that slide that had the parking information on it. Can we pull that up again?
The garage levels?
No, just the slide that lists the number of spaces and the number of units. Because it's a very important thing to obviously be in code, right? And I believe the code is 1 space per unit. Yeah, that's the one. Yes, so this is something that obviously has to be worked out. Yeah, if we look at that, what does it say here? Is that the one with the parking on it? I'm not sure. No, that does not have the parking. So one of the slides had a parking.
Was it the sketch plan? The sketch plan? Okay. Let me escape and navigate to that.
Okay. Right, they lowered it, and I think there was an issue with. Okay, right, so 553, 122, and then 447. And it's 800 units, right? 800 family units,
Roughly.
roughly
plus or minus,
790,
yeah.
yep. I think that's going to be a concern. So maybe, I guess the question would be, what options, what things can we do to help benefit the neighborhood to reduce some of the possible parking overflow that is going to be
Say, do you think this number is too high or too low? Because it depends.
absolutely too low, right? I mean, this is a Montgomery County, which is a county that requires cars to drive, I mean, or to get to work or et cetera. And multiple family units require multiple cars, generally speaking. So this should be addressed. So if you guys have anything that you could recommend or things to discuss, I guess that would be the question. What options are available to us and what ideas do you guys have to help mitigate some of those issues? I'll go ahead. Let's see.
Yeah, sure. Moving on.
Everybody. So thank you for the question. Again, my name is Shane Poland, principal of PS Ventures. It's a great question about parking, and frankly, it depends on who you're talking to, is whether you are talking to somebody who wants the parking to go to 0, which is where legislation is currently going towards, or as you are suggesting, that we really want to try to accommodate, as Square mentioned, the parking on the site, so the pressure isn't to. If we provided, for example, 0 parking on site, one might anticipate that folks still have cars, they will find a place to park, they park at the nearest location, and that's on the street in the neighborhood adjacent. And that's not what we want. And so I think right now, actually, the total number of spaces, you're citing just,
The max.
yeah,
values, I think.
yeah, you're citing, it's actually a range, and you're citing the residential and their commercial components. And what we're looking at is trying to balance that. So we've had a study done. I think our total current parking is actually about 1,100 parking spaces, which frankly, when a lot of people hear that, they go the other way and say, how can you be building 1,100 parking spaces adjacent to a BRT station, adjacent, half a mile from a metro station? And the answer is, you've alluded to it, that right now we're not quite there where everybody is comfortable driving or riding transit. And so this is actually where our sustainability will come in again. We've got a couple ways that we can use as we develop to right size the parking in subsequent phases. So if we didn't get it right in the first phase, likely overparked, frankly, then we cannot build as much parking when we get to phase 2, because we've already built the parking in phase 1. We're also doing things like electrifying. The building is all electric. That's the direction things are. We're not bringing combustible sources of energy other than potentially for a backup generator if the battery technology isn't there yet. And what that means is we're really focused on electricity, including electrifying this parking garage to a very large extent. And what that means is that ultimately this might be a place where community can also come to charge your vehicles in the event that we have spaces that are available there. So what can we do to increase that the longevity of that investment in the parking is to try to make sure that if the future is electric, and I think the future is electric vehicles, that we can accommodate and be an asset to the community in that way. So we're trying not to under park, and we're trying not to over park. And that's going to be a difficult situation over time, but we're trying to think into the future how we're going to adapt. So it's a great question. I don't think, if anything, I'd say we're leaning towards accommodating more parking. Really, because again, we've heard from the community, we don't want folks exiting, like, looking for spaces in the community. We'd like to accommodate them. And if that means that we're overbuilding parking, how can we make that an investment that can bear fruit in the future? So thank you for your question.
And, it's slide number 14.
We might have
When we
reorganized.
first started this project, the vision in 2019, I think, you had phase 1 as the ambassador. And you had phase 2 as Lindsay. Now, when we went to the planning board, you had swapped it. You decided to build the Lindsay first. I come from the community of Kensington View, and that's our little community that you're just kind of surrounding there. We suggested that you flip it back because that ambassador site is supposed to be the gateway to Wheaton. You look at the sector plan. So far, we've had 4 years of just empty space on that lot. And now I'm confused on your construction duration. How can you have minus 36 months? So if it starts in 2026 and the plus applies, not the minus, you're talking at 2029 and we still don't have a gateway building. So what's going to be, you show an interim of just grass. Is that it? Is that it for that 20? That's my question.
Well, I think, yes, we did change the phasing. There's a number of reasons that guided why that phasing was updated and modified, right? I think it was a combination of things, just constructability, moving from the north before blocking the corner in. And if we were to put any retail in that corner building, trying to construct the 2 buildings, which are now phase 1 now, after that building would be in place, would be very obstructive to that retail tenant, right? Would not be beneficial. That additionally, plus the Wheaton area has been in a little bit of a slump as it relates to retail over the past few years, and we've been watching that very closely, right? So we didn't want to program the building first that was had a larger retail component, only to have our retail partners struggle ultimately, right? So that was sort of the decision to reverse our phasing in that regard. Now, the interim condition, yes, it is open space area, but we believe that that area can also be programmed. We've been talking about potentially doing things with food trucks or opening it up to the community for whether it be a farmer's market or things of that nature. So while it may not be the ultimate gateway that we intend to build at in the immediate moment, it still would be useful and I think beneficial to the ultimate community. So. Mhm.
Plus and minus 36 months. Are you saying that the commencement is 2026? And what is your actual plan?
Yeah, we just want to use the mic so that.
Well, it helps our virtual
That's
audience.
okay.
Yeah.
What is your actual plan for the construction on phase 1? Because if you're saying plus or minus, I'm thinking, well, actually, maybe the construction is really 5 years and plus or minus 3 years. And also, what's it gonna look like? Right now, it doesn't look very pleasant up at the ambassador site. Is that pretty much we're gonna look at for the next 10 years until you get around to phase 2?
Well, the interim condition will be completed alongside our phase 1 construction. So that green area that we showed you, that's not coming afterwards. That's coming with the phase 1 as well, right? So
Okay,
that,
so it's gonna be grass.
yeah, it's going to be the open area that can be used for various community uses and otherwise, right? That would be happening during our phase 1 construction. Again, the plus and minus is generally just used to do as an approximation. We're still so early in our development and design timeline that we're not sure what that construction timeline would be.
Will you have a better idea once you get through the permitting?
Absolutely. Well, we hope to have our contractor fully
Okay, okay.
engaged and
Thank you.
you can give us more context to that.
Yeah, and also, just to follow on, this is the site and subdivision plan. We're not at building permit yet, and we haven't even chosen things like the structural frame of this building. And the structural frame of this building is something that we're spending a really large amount of time because we're investigating whether we can find a way to build out of mass timber. Because we're focused not only on operational carbon, but also on embodied carbon. And what that means is that we're trying to see if there's a way, and it's still very new, you don't see a lot of tall mass timber buildings here, but making decisions like that also impact time, hopefully speed it up, but maybe not. And so we're just not at a point, we're not being evasive. We're not through the process and we don't have the buildings fully designed. We don't have the general contractor on board who's going to build it. And so this is the design and development team giving you our best estimate for how long it's going to take to build the project. And no, it will not look like it does right now because we haven't really started yet. Right now, it's just been the demolition, but not new construction to put that interim condition into place. And we're still refining what it is, but we envision it being a programmed space that can be an asset to the community. This has been mentioned, and you brought this up before, the idea that this, that the marquee building almost is at the corner. This is going to be an exceptional building, or two buildings, both of them. Exceptional buildings. We're not waiting to build the exceptional building on the corner and just putting some stuff up in the meantime. Every one of these buildings, both of these buildings, will be built as Goyer's described to an above code minimum standard. We're building to the passive house standard. That is generally regarded as the world's most rigorous building standard when it comes to resiliency and sustainability. That's what's going here. So you'll have two great buildings out on the corner and a programmable amenity. I think if anything, we're concerned that the programmable amenity might be something that folks don't necessarily want to give up on the corner when we do build the final building. So we hear you, and it's just, we haven't invested in the corner the way we will when we build the first phase. Also some, I'm going to feed in the online questions. Okay.
Hey, I'm Mike English. I live in downtown Silver Spring, and just really want to note my support for the project. Think, we need a lot more housing. In general, I'm a fan of HOC's mixed income. Vaguely familiar with passive house, sounds good, all that. I will note, and this isn't a complaint, like do what you need to do. I know more about parking needs by me than by here. That is more parking than like most places near Metro. I say here, again, not a complaint if you think that's what is needed. I'll just note that for the audience that this is not on the low end of parking. And I took the Metro up here, took 10 minutes. Not everyone does that. Most people still need cars, not disputing that, but,
yeah.
But yes, things good. The only thing I would note is, you seem to have a plan for making this, look nice and all, and I think that's all good. I sometimes see concessions happen in order to lessen opposition and things, and sometimes units are lost along the way. And my understanding is zoning allows this by right, and I would encourage you to prioritize keeping the unit count high because we have a dire shortage of homes. So thank you.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna chime in with a question from the virtual audience, and we'll get to in just a second. We have a question that was typed in the chat. The planning board's approved sketch plan resolution says the applicant must explore the undergrounding of utilities along the site frontages and propose a reasonable and proportional strategy to underground as much of the overhead utilities as practical. Priority for undergrounding utilities should be placed on Veirs Mill Road and University Boulevard to improve both the aesthetic appearance of the streetscape and improve pedestrian, bicycle, and traffic safety. The planning board will determine the scope of undergrounding utilities along the property's frontages during site plan review. The question is, what is the estimated cost to comply with the planning board's directive to bury the wires along University and Veirs Mill frontages?
Yeah. So to answer the question about the estimated cost, we've done some investigation with our dry utility contractor, and we're around the ballpark of roughly around $5 million to achieve what the planning board staff has requested of us. Again, you'd hear that the resolution asks about making sure that we're proportional as it relates to the project, and that is something that we are currently in conversations with them with. We're trying to find out what striking that balance is, because again, the $5 million price park is just a little bit steeper than we anticipated. And again, we think that some of these lines that are being asked to buried are not even directly serving our project. So again, this is an ongoing conversation that we intend to have more with park and planning staff as we go in with this submission and as we navigate through the rest of this year to sort of come to some sort of consensus as to where we land.
I'm just going to follow up because the follow-up question is around this. Does the applicant plan to ask the planning board waive the undergrounding requirement due to cost? If so, would the applicant entertain funding a less costly off-site but nearby undergrounding project of an equivalent frontage?
Yeah, so no, we're not asking for a waiver of a requirement, but again, undergrounding isn't a requirement. It was asked to be something that we'd investigate, which we did, and to find out that it was $5 million. And so we're not looking to avoid burial. We're looking to do an amount of burial that we think is reasonable in proportion to our impact, which frankly, we don't think we have impact on these lines, but we committed to nonetheless burying on the most important frontage, which is the south side of Veirs Mill. And so that's about a $1.2 million burial. And we are remaining committed to that $1.2 million burial, notwithstanding what we think is not really a nexus or proportionality between even that and our site. But nonetheless, we know that this is important and it's our frontage. And so we're looking to do that $1.2 million burial. It actually is taking the Veirs Mill line from our entrance and burying it south all the way across University. So yeah, coming all the way under. It's not. No,
not on the eastern portion
not
of it.
burying the, and again, you guys are out there, but look up, we don't always look at the poles. If we look up at the poles, you'll see a difference between the poles on University and the poles on Veirs Mill. Namely, there's an upper tier to the poles on University because those are regional lines. And so again, we don't, if we build these buildings and you're focused on that pole or those poles, we've probably done something wrong. And again, you know, utility burial, it is something that's nice. It is aesthetically nice, but it is very expensive to do. And we are trying to balance a lot to deliver really exceptional properties here at a mix of incomes that you do not see in most properties. So we're not looking to waive out of a requirement. We're looking to provide what we think is a proportional improvement.
Do you want a question from the audience?
I was 6 when I suggested this in 2019. Is there a designated space where there's gonna be like a play area or playgrounds?
Actually, yes. Well, if you could navigate over. So if you keep an eye on the screen, we actually are that pocket park that I mentioned over on the corner of Upton and Eastern Avenue. That is actually going to be our designated park area where we plan to have playground equipment, et cetera. So your suggestion was heard and we took that into consideration. So thank you. So it's not built out here, but this sort of semi-triangle looking area.
In fact, it might be getting a little bit larger because it used to have stormwater management functions on it as well. And some of those are now in those cascading. You see those tiered levels that come down. That's stormwater, which is going to make a little bit more space for programming at the playground.
Hi, my name is Kim Prasad, and I live here in Wheaton. And Thrive 2050 has passed, and it is, you know, by right. So you don't have to take our opinions into consideration, but you are, and you've been doing that since 2019. And I want to say thank you for the good, the bad, and the ugly for standing up here. I know it's rough, and I want to say thank you because it really makes a difference in the community when we have a say and we feel valued. My question, I have 2 questions, one from 2019. 2019 question, the amenities. I'm interested in the amenities that we discussed. And my other question is about affordability. You said there's a range. Now we have, they're saying that they're going to have a lot of people coming in here, moving into the Montgomery County area. with the majority of them making $50,000 and less. Will they be able to live in these apartments, or are this MPDUs, which is what, 60–70% of AMI? Can you explain that portion to us? Thank you.
Sure. So you're right. I guess brief explanation. MPDU stands for moderately priced dwelling units. And Montgomery County, one of our claims to fame, if you will, was being an innovator in MPDUs by creating this ordinance a number of decades ago. And what it basically meant was that a certain percentage of the homes within a community needed to be designed to be affordable to those making certain incomes, or and the income is described as the area median income. So it's not just in this neighborhood, but it's overall in the area, and it's expressed as a percentage, affordable to those making X% of the area median income. And historically, because Montgomery County was really focused on this MPDU program, which traditionally would be 60%, I think it's actually 70 for a high rise, it would be those affordable to those making 60% of the area median income. It's not one number, it's actually a table. Depends on how many folks are in the household, right? And so to see what it is at affordable at a certain level. Unfortunately, while that program has been great and it's produced a lot of affordable housing, it doesn't always address housing. What if you make 50% of area median income, or 70% of area median income, or 30% of area median income? And so the newer way that's really being espoused by our partners at HOC is to use an income averaging approach. An approach that says we want a blend of incomes, don't just produce everything at 60%. Let's recognize that there are folks at other percents, and let's try to blend that across there and come up with metrics that basically utilize an averaging across those. And so that is our intent here. So first of all, the typical, how much affordable housing? The typical would be, depending on where you are, call it 12.5% to 15% of the homes. Our target is 30%. The typical would be MPDU, right? Over delivering is what the county has done at that 60% or 70%. We're going from 30 to 80. So you can see we're really trying to innovate and learn, right? For what has HOC learned from their portfolio? And to try to become a community that's welcoming to folks of all income streams, not a concentration at 60 and the rest market rate. And so we're gonna provide more than twice what is, and this is a mission, the commission, if you listen to the commission, they've got a mission. There's a shortage of housing. There's a shortage of affordable housing. And so that's why you're seeing these buildings meeting the vision of this sector plan, and why the buildings are so dense, if you will, because that's what the sector plan called for here. The county needs housing. HOC is stepping up and evidencing leadership to provide housing at a rate that's twice the amount of housing that would otherwise be required by the affordable program, and to do it at blended income. I hope that answers. And with respect to the amenities question,
Yeah.
were you asking about amenities in the building or on the site or both, or? Okay, I don't know, Gore, do you want to hit some of the amenities like the?
Yeah, sure. I mentioned that park we talked about just on the corner of Upton and Eastern Avenue. Actually, right off of Veirs Mill Road, we have sort of a, what's it called, urban plaza that we're building right there. That'll be open to the community as well. As far as amenities in the building, there's a series of amenities we're currently considering between party rooms, planning rooms, and things of that nature. But this is actually the phase. We're actually in the process of refining what those spaces look like. This is an image of the urban park. Again, this is not the final design. We're actually iterating on that, but that's going to be a space that's available to the general public. Yes, so I think it was with we also discussed art being on the outside, and we're talking about.
Yeah, we have. Thank you for reminding us. Yeah, we're not opposed to that. We're just not probably at that granular level of design, but I think we should incorporate it. We understand that, Wheaton prides itself and it really is an association with art. And so we're going to try to carry that through. I do want to, one of our design members, team members on the call, not only, stepping back to that prior question about affordability, but not only are we having a variety of, a range of affordability, we've got a range of unit types, right? Including larger homes, frankly, for families. Because we talk about that shortage of housing, there are, you rarely find a 3-bedroom or even a 4-bedroom home. And there are folks who need those houses. So we're really trying to address a lot of needs. As long as HOC is making this investment and we've got this team, we're trying to cover a lot of bases. And so I didn't want to go without saying that. And then the interior programming,
It's ongoing. There's an
it's
end-
ongoing, but these will be fully amenitized, interior properties to attract, we have to compete in the market.
Mary Stickles, also from Wheaton. I actually wanted to jump on that point of the variety of units. How did you come up with that? Because for this area, I was thinking that perhaps really more on the 3 and 4 bedroom versus so many 1-bedrooms. If I were thinking about, what's been built lately, what's available in the community, what type of people want to live in a place like Wheaton, it's, a lot of families. So how did you come up with that number? I'm sure there must be some scientific methodology.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of elements that go into it. We look at the market. We had an initial market study done. We talk to our partners at HOC and see where they're seeing demand right within their. And so I hear you on the 3 and 4, but this is an extraordinary number of 3 and 4, even though relative to the others. But right, each of those larger homes occupies more space. And so if you filled it all with 4 bedrooms, you would have fewer homes housing fewer families. And so it's a balance basically, and whether we can get it right here, but this is the other benefit of having a second phase. While we've got that exterior, we will have flexibility. The actual floor plans are not part of the site plan process, other than, as Goyer explained, what's happening on the inside reflects through the outside. And so the pattern of windows that you see, the pattern of balconies you see, there's a balcony for each home. If there were a 4-bedroom and it was more, you'd see fewer balconies. So we do set it now based on a variety of pieces of information, and we have an opportunity in the next phase also to see. That being said, also, as all the partners are long-term holders, so we try not to be fickle with you. It's like everybody wants, and the greatest thing is like the studio. Let's fill the whole thing of studio. Find out then there's, like that wasn't the thing. So we're trying to achieve this timely, or a balance that will last the test of time safely. And we think that this is it.
I'm going to jump to virtual real quick. Couple questions. Is the site near enough to Metro to benefit from the zoning changes that recently reduced parking requirements for transit-oriented housing? If not, will you be pursuing exemptions to provide the same cost benefits and space efficiencies to your tenants?
Yes, the project is close enough to Metro, or probably about 2 to 5 minutes of walking to the Metro. So we could take advantage of those reductions in parking that the county code is dictating now, or has recently been updated. But again, as Shane mentioned, and I think as many people in the audience have espoused, parking is a challenge. And we're trying to find the right balance and the right fit. Right now, we're programmed for at least the required amount of parking, if not in excess of that, a little bit in excess of that. But again, we're trying to take a measured approach to how we unfold this parking. So as we do the first 2 phases, we want to see how our parking is currently doing, and we have the ability to expand our garage, our subgrade garage, to accommodate more parking if need be. So again, we're not trying to overfill the market with parking, but we're trying to be very particular and measured about how we do it. But we are planning to program for more parking than is typically seen in a development of this type. I think there was another part to the question as well.
Second question, when will Lindsay Ford finally leave?
We're not 100% clear. According to our current timeline, we'll probably have discussions with Lindsay Ford, with giving them enough time to vacate the site as we approach the anticipated Q1 construction start. But again, these are estimate timelines. Park and planning process could take a little bit longer, shorter. We're not 100% clear, but we'll probably start engaging them within 6 months or so prior to that timeline. To have discussions and at least better understand when they'll be transitioning out of the space.
And just officer briefly, we view Lindsay as a partner too. right? So I know that there are folks who would like to see the project come along, but Lindsay has been a longtime member of the community too, as a business member, and they've employed a lot of folks, and I'm sure have worked on a lot of cars. So they will ultimately be finding another location, but we wish them, you know, the best of luck in their next locations. And, you know, we're not in a rush to kick them out as quickly as we can, because we want their business to succeed. And so we're hoping that it could be an orderly transition and that they can stay open as long as it's not, you know, impactful to our ability to deliver on time or as quickly as we can.
Hello, I'm a resident of the Gateway neighborhood. I have 2 kids. The children of the buildings, of those families, will be likely mapped to Einstein High School and Newport Mill. Those schools are crowded, in fact, have some busting out of the seams on the side. They have lots of classrooms being built outside the school. What considerations have been made for sort of the potential student increase? Is there thoughts in terms of improving the school, enlarging the school as a result of the increase in the community? Or will there be sort of, you know, additional considerations for mapping kids to other schools to accommodate?
I'm not as cognizant of this, but I think there's been a recent moratorium on schools.
Yeah, so this is a tough one because the schools are the school system, right? And I know that wherever we develop this, you know, I have a daughter in Montgomery County Public School. My wife is a public school teacher in Montgomery County. It's really a matter of getting the planners at the school board to accommodate the development that's called for within the plans that the county is doing. So it's not really within our scope to address the capacity at the schools, expanding schools, what the catchment area of schools are, or how that's changed, which I'm sure you can appreciate is a difficult issue. But I would just encourage you to reach out to you know, Montgomery County's school board and to say that the project is coming. You know, they're obviously in touch with this organization, MNC-PPC, to hear and see the development pipeline. But unfortunately, it's just beyond the scope of our project. We have to meet an adequacy, so the project will meet its adequacy of public facilities, schooling being one of those public facilities. But beyond meeting that adequacy test, there's not much we can do to address the issues that you really raised. They're good questions, and I think that maybe that forum would be a good one to say, hey, the project's coming. Can you tell us how you're going to accommodate the programming?
Question in the virtual audience. Will the project add a buffer before the sidewalks on Veirs?
Before the sidewalk.
Yeah,
There is a tree buffer plan, sorry. Should be talking into the mic. Yes, there is a current tree buffer plan between the right of way and the curb. There's a tree buffer then planned. And I think we have a bi-directional bike lane and sidewalks programmed for our front. So our streets will align to, I think it's the Wheaton streets or the Wheaton street, the street guidelines, the current.
Consistent with our sketch.
Yeah.
Consistent with our sketch plan. You'll see, but you got it, Corey.
Yeah.
There's a buffer. So correct. Right now what's being described is the condition of having the sidewalk immediately on the back of the curb. And for those who walk on that sidewalk, you will know that that is not the most comfortable, what we call street section, when you have vehicles immediately adjacent to you. And so what our plan is doing is what you can see on the screen on both Veirs and University is we're pulling up the sidewalk that's immediately adjacent to the curb, and we're putting a landscape panel that can be inclusive of trees into that. Whether, by the way, just as a planning guideline, whether it's this and or parking, right, which is what's actually happening on the other side when you come down east. That's something else that if you walk on a street that has cars parked on it, you inherently feel safer. I don't know if you've paid attention to this, but if you just walk on a street that's immediately on the curb with cars going right by, you kind of bias your way away. You just don't totally feel comfortable. You add just it doesn't even have to be much, but you add a couple feet of landscaping and get yourself, you start feeling more comfortable, you add a car park, you start feeling, and so, yes, we are creating that buffer.
Question, what type of retail, commercial businesses can we expect?
Did we say? I think it's still a little bit early for us to define. We've had some interest from some grocers, especially as it relates to our Section 3 building. But again, that building is the one that's a little bit further out on our planning timeline. In our current commercial space, we've had some interest in other people related to childcare and
Private
preschool. Yeah, so we've been having conversations with them in earnest, and we think that it's shaping up to be a really good fit. Something that we think can benefit the community as well as be a good partner in our property as well.
Question, follow-up. You've already mentioned the issues with commercial retail businesses. How will that be dealt with? And what looks to be a large amount of commercial space here?
Really, it's a very difficult question to answer. We're really hoping that the time and the phasing efforts that we've taken in terms of modifying the phasing approach will give time for sort of the retail market to sort of reset itself and for us to have a better forecast on how it's doing. Again, there has been some interest over time, but again, the fickle nature of the retail, we've heard brokers complain that things aren't as stable as they'd like it to be. So I think the short answer is that we're hoping that time will give us a better lens and a better purview as to how the retail market is operating and give us an opportunity to find the right candidate to fill into that space. As for the overall square footage, is it roughly 30 or 40,000 in Section 1?
In Section 1, I think it's, the combined section is about 15,000, I think is where we are.
Sorry, I was referring
Yeah.
to Section 3.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, in Section 3, I think it's on the sketch plan for the maximum, but it depends when we go into the second floor. So I'd refer to the sketch plan drawing, but
Yeah.
I think it's more like, yeah, I think it's more in the 30,000
square feet.
foot range. But again, depending on whether, look, hopefully there's more commercial that the site can support in the future. We had originally designed this as a food hall pre-COVID, right? But those businesses had difficulty in COVID, which again, back to that question for why are we pushing, switching the phasing? We want the retail to survive. And so from a number of perspectives, that retail will do better when there are more people to frequent it. And so by building the Section 1 and 2 buildings first, those folks will be able to support the retail, the more extensive retail that's out at the corner in Section 3. And so hopefully we will be able to support a lot of retail, but it's premature to know what we're going to see. We have seen grocery interest, and we hope that interest remains. But again, that's also another type of use that's very difficult to keep open in the middle of a construction site. And so that's, you know, we're optimistic that we're going to, with the benefit of the Section 1 and 2 buildings in Phase 1, be able to attract some really great options for the community to enjoy in Phase 2.
Hello. I'm really excited about this project. I live in the townhouses just down the street from Lindsay, and I've been waiting for this for a while now, so I'm excited to see it move forward. I'm curious to know, and I missed the presentation, so I apologize if you already addressed this, but I'm curious to know if you've aligned the planning with the construction timing for the BRT, and also back to the astute question about the sidewalks having a buffer. What will the sidewalk situation be during the construction phase? Because I do walk back and forth to the metro all the time.
Good question. So to answer the first question, as far as coordination with BRT, yes, we are in active conversations. We probably had a conversation with them, if not week past or the week prior, speaking about that very same topic. So we're still trying to work through the details on phasing, as in and the BRT is right adjacent to the corner of University and Veirs Mill. So that would be our Section 3 building. So we're actually having a conversation with them about sort of who would come first or second. And again, your question is timely because we have a meeting tomorrow to talk about the phasing and we're planning to discuss how that sidewalk would look while construction is going on. So it's not something that we have a definitive plan, but obviously we're trying to make sure we're being cognizant of the people who still need to navigate that area and minimize as much impact as possible to them while we're going through construction. So that is something that's going to continue to get refined and developed as we continue going through the design process. But it's in our radar to discuss.
We also want to be safe.
Yeah.
And so safety might mean closing the sidewalk at, so that we don't have an interaction between construction
and
and pedestrians. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
is the
it's
challenge.
really, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a challenge. We have, as we constantly describe it, long unbroken medians, unbroken by everything, including intervening sidewalks, to get across. So it's a good question. I think we had a very productive discussion, as Gordon mentioned, with the BRT folks. We think it would be best to deliver the BRT station with the project rather than having to install things, tear it out and put it back, because as we just described, the sidewalk isn't where it's going to be. So if you tie the current sidewalk into the BRT station and then we move the sidewalk, you got to tear out the work that you just did. So we're coordinating closely with them. And you raise a good point, and we'll say, like, if it closes, what can we do? Can we put an intermediate crossing? How do we address that? But thank you.
No money there for a Veirs mill. I mean, there's for study, so.
Yeah.
So timing is off.
Let us look at it. Again, we're trying to balance that safety, even if we keep it open. Yeah, let us look at it.
Question, how many trees and square feet of grass are adjacent to Kensington Boulevard right now? And will all of that sustainably be removed?
I mean, I'm trying to think, when you go down East Avenue, there's almost zero trees and grass on the, I mean, there's a handful on our side. That's Lindsay's parking. It's all paved. When you get down to Kensington and make the turn, like, I mean, it's sort of an end. You can come through the dentist's office, but I
Yeah, I
don't,
think it's just an open grass.
yeah,
area, but-
I'm not, this is not a green field really area that.
But as far as conservation, any trees that are removed, we are currently making plans to replace. So I don't think we're going to be having a net negative impact on the overall amount of trees that you're seeing there. Again, right now, what's shown in that lower Lindsay lot is just an open grass area. And again, that's currently being used as a parking lot. So again, our forest conservation plan will address any trees that need to be sort of replanted or repurposed.
Yeah, I feel comfortable saying that the tree situation and stormwater management will be
Will be greatly
vastly
improved.
superior following the construction of this property.
Question, has there been any study as to how this will impact local property values?
No, actually, we haven't done any studies on the impacts of property values. I'm not sure that there is a study that yeah. within the
Not
context.
really within the scope of our project to look at that. Some people might think it will make them go up. Some people, I don't, I hope it goes, I mean, I hope it improves the area and makes the property values go up, but I always know that there's a challenge of folks on fixed incomes and seeing, so there's no great answer for what's going to happen here. I don't know what the market's going to do ultimately surrounding us when we build Wheaton Gateway. But we hope it's an asset to the community.
There's just a follow-up about the grocery store. Can you expand at all about the opportunity to bring a grocery store on site?
Yeah.
There has been some expressed interest, some time ago. Again, this was, prior to the pandemic, so obviously those conversations sort of fizzled to some degree. Again, we're still not opposed to a potential grocer, but again, we're still trying to wait out and understand what the retail market is, and that phase that would best accommodate a grocer, which is, phase 2, section 3, is a little bit further on our timeline. So we haven't had more in-depth conversation as it relates to that. And again, we will pick that conversation back up when that construction timeline is a bit more eminent.
Yeah, just to add to that, because we knew that there was that interest, right? We've done some programming, for example, that loading that you see, that consolidated loading. We want to be able to accommodate a grocer. If we're fortunate enough, we think it would be an asset. So that's, again, also back related to that parking question. They're going to want to have enough parking for people to drive to the grocery. Not everyone will walk. And we know that you'll need to load that grocery store. And so we've done a lot of thinking of how do you integrate to not be impactful, a loading internal, like it's inside the building. Will's showing it here, this entrance. And beyond this entrance, there's literally an area for a vehicle to come in and back in and have a dedicated loading space to that. So again, we've had interest. I won't name the names, but they're commonly known grocers who have expressed interest, and we're trying to, as developers, create a development that is attractive, right, to them. The area is the area, but how do we make it so that it has a nice frontage, so that they can easily operate there, so that there are patrons who can frequent them and get to them easily. So these are all the things. This is how we're designing it right now, even though we don't have that tenant.
Actually, that's how Westfield Wheaton Mall was actually first loaded the underground as well. But to help you out, don't expect it again. I think as far as property prices go, I think that what was there before certainly wasn't helping anybody's property values. And even an empty lot is better than what was there. So I hope you don't do any worse. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Question from the virtual Q&A. Why wasn't the McDonald's incorporated into the project?
The McDonald's property had fairly recently redeveloped, and I think we reached out at one point in time, and I don't think they were particularly interested in joining the assemblage that we were trying to put together with the other properties. So again, we thought about it, we reached out, we tried to make contact, but I think we were just a little bit late in terms of their development timeline as it respects to ours.
Question, underwhelmed by some of the retail spaces that have materialized in several other nearby developments. Any plans to directly invest in or subsidize rent for tenants like cafes to benefit residents and neighbors? And will any spaces be purpose-built to bring an enclosed garden or an eatery?
This is an interesting one. I think when we were originally, you might have to repeat it.
Any plans to directly invest in or subsidize rent for any tenants like cafes to benefit residents and neighbors? And will any spaces be purpose-built to bring an enclosed garden to an eatery?
So I would say, yeah, I mean, yes, we have looked at and considered subsidizing through making investments in finishing spaces more than what a traditional developer might otherwise do, to lower a barrier of entry for a retailer. Again, we don't have space of that sort in phase 1, section 1 or 2 in the buildings. And we've been looking at we've mentioned a grocer in phase 2. But there's a sister project to this, Hillendale. And I can just tell you that this is a discussion that we have, again, HOC, trying to meet the needs of the community. So if we did, that was actually one of the impetuses behind the idea of a food hall. So a food hall is very much that. It's an investment, right? It's a model that tries to lower the barrier to entry to the restaurateurs who are trying to come in. It's sort of a step between a food truck and a full-on restaurant. You've got common dishware, common management, common systems, common cashier. Like there's lots of commonalities to these to try to lower that barrier to entry. So it's absolutely something we would look at, and we will continue to look at the market for retail in this way, being conscious that HOC is also interested in investing, right, in helping support small businesses. This is what I really am proud about being partnered with HOC with. I didn't know much about HOC when we first partnered with them on the sister project to this, Hillendale Gateway. But HOC is not looking at this project or any other project as an investment purely in that building. They're looking at it as an investment in that community. And they ask us, and I think that we are well suited as a development partner for them, because we also care about what is it that the community is looking for and how can we tweak our project, right, to try to be an asset. I really keep saying that term because that's what we want to be. HOC never wants to have a project come forward where we go, man, I wish we had Lindsay, or we were better off before. That is not the goal. The goal is to see what we can do with this large investment that's being made to accommodate as many goals and satisfy as many missions as we can. And so to the degree that supporting small business is yet another thing and employment that comes with it, absolutely. We look at all opportunities.
Yeah, I think, Shane, a classic example that we've been exploring is the coffee shop opportunity in Section 1, right? We've been looking at ways to program a potential cafe or coffee shop that could be used as a training ground. There's a number of programs that we've seen nationally pop up, and we haven't been able to find alignment with any particular one. But we've been exploring opportunities to potentially have them operate that as a training cafe that could be a training ground for the community and residents of the building, and still offer a service as a small business as well. Again, so it's things that we talked about and toyed around with, but that is evidences that we're trying to think through these things and identify opportunities that are beneficial to small businesses as well. Right?
I have two questions left. What are the plans for the Veirs Mill East property?
I think the Veirs Mill East property, that is not part of this assemblage right now. You notice we focused on the west side. That is a property that is owned with HOC and probably a future timeline, but it's not in the purview of this current development. So we don't have any current sight on what the anticipated plan is for that property.
And did your firms design and build the housing units on Georgia Avenue in Wheaton?
No, we did not. I think that's another HOC property potentially that they're referring to, or? No, probably no, but no, our firms were not involved in any of the developments along Georgia Avenue in the Wheaton area.
Sorry, I lied. There's one more. Are you engaging with the mall to press for bike pedestrian improvements to improve your ability to sell car-free living to your new residents?
We had initial conversations with the mall, but not specifically on that topic. And since then, we haven't had much of any communication with them more recently. So I think short answer is no, that is not currently part of our discussion. Again, we'd entertain any discussion as long as it's within our purview and something that we can manage within the context of our side. We're willing to explore the discussion, but no, we haven't had any conversations with Westfield.
I will say, just adding, after we make a significant investment in a bi-directional bikeway on our side of Veirs Mill and University, it would be wonderful if others were to make investments so that it's not a section, but a part instead of a much larger system. So we will be with you and supportive of other investments in the bikeway. But right now, what we could say is what we will be doing our part for sure to build that.
Those are all the questions online. Are there any?
Yeah, I mean, not in phase one. We're not programming a pool. We have designed a pool for the sister project, so who knows, maybe something in the next phase, but it's not something that we've currently programmed.
What are vacancies nearby at Safeway, and what does that imply for the retail demand?
We're not currently aware of what the vacancies are. Again, we have done a market study in the past just generally, but that's mostly focused on residential and not so much the retail components, and something that we plan to brush off in the coming months. But as it relates to the retail or any of the properties over near Safeway, we haven't done any studies related to that.
And I'll just point out, what retail needs to survive is patrons. And that's why you see master plans and sector plans put higher density in areas, right, to concentrate density, so you have shoppers. Would just sort of end on, I think, on this, but the idea is that we as development team are trying to create a development that is attractive to residents and to businesses. And the community often wants better amenities, right? You want more restaurants to frequent. But we, the development team, are not the restaurants. We are not restaurateurs. We are developers. We are trying to attract the same restaurants that you want. We want them too. But what do they want? They want to know who's eating dinner. Who's going to eat lunch at my restaurant? Right? Can I succeed if I choose to open here instead of wherever else I choose to open? And so that's what we're trying to do, is to create a space and provide housing who are the patrons who will frequent the restaurants, which if they succeed are available for use by the community. And so all these things become related, right? So we're putting that back again to that question, sort of why would you build this part? Because that first phase, that corner building has much more retail, and we want it to succeed. So we'll be more or less likely to succeed if there are already two buildings successfully going with all of the people right there. More likely to succeed if that stuff is already there than if it's a promise as to what will come. And so that's, again, back to why our sequence is where our sequence is. And what we're trying to do is to create a community that is attractive to both residents, those businesses, and therefore also be attractive by creating places to shop and eat, ultimately for the community. So again, we really do appreciate Goyer. Thank you. I think Goyer did a great job. And, you know, we're not going anywhere. We've been around for years. If you have any questions, this is the answering period does not end right now. Just let us know, and we will continue to do the best we can to be transparent with you. And again, we're very fortunate to have HOC as our partner. So we thank HOC as our partners. We thank Wilco as our partners and Duffy. And, you know, close it up, Gord.
Yes, it will. Yeah.
This presentation will be uploaded to the wheatongateway.com website. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can certainly send them to that email, info@wheatongateway.com. Okay,
Awesome. Thank you.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate you coming out. This is great. Sure. Thank you. I will be